Good morning, Yellow Jackets. I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes and just give you a little bit of history of this wonderful high school, Howard W. Blake High School. My name is Fred Hearns. I'm Black History Curator at the Tampa Bay History Center down in Channelside. We're open 7 days a week, and we encourage you, when you have an opportunity, come with your friends, your family, with other people who might want to learn more about Tampa history. So for the next 20 minutes, this is all going to be about the history of Howard W. Blake High School. I'm going to be sharing some things with you that you may not have been aware of. Before I begin, I want to introduce two friends of mine who are graduates of the original Howard W. Blake High School, right around the corner on Spruce Street. First of all, a former principal of Howard W. Blake High School, graduate of the Blake High School class of 1970, Mr. Lewis Brinson. Stand up, Mr. Brinson, please. Now, the original Howard W. Blake High School opened in 1956. A member of the graduating class of 1959, Ms. Frances Jennings. You may have seen Ms. Jennings here. She's very active with the Blake High School Alumni Association. Any other Blake High School alumni graduates here? Would you stand or raise your hand if you're here? So today we're going to look at some slides and again cover some of the history of this school. The man in the picture is Mr. Howard W. Blake. For some 20 years he was principal at Booker T. Washington Junior High School. Raise your hands if you know where Booker T. Washington Elementary School is. Some of you may have attended, I'm not sure. But it's not very far from here. It's off Nebraska Avenue. And he was principal of that school for 20 years. When Mr. Blake died in the 1950s, a year later, the school board of Hillsborough County decided that they would name the newest high school for black students for Mr. Blake. You have to know that in 1956, black students could only attend all black high schools. And there were only two in Tampa at the time and one in Plant City. The school in Plant City was Marshall High School for black students. The school on the east side of town that opened in 1934, a school that I attended in the 1960s, George Schroeder Middleton High School. And in 1956, the school board opened a high school in West Tampa for black students. All of the teachers were black, all of the coaches and other administrators and staff members were black, and the entire student body, black students. Howard W. Blake High School opened in 1956. Today, that building is Stewart Middle School, right around the corner. Who knows where Stewart is? Right around the corner from you. That building was the original Howard W. Blake High School. The building you're looking at in this photo was Booker T. Washington, the school that Mr. Blake was principal of for 20 years. That's Mr. Blake sitting on the left, some of his teachers listening to the radio. During the time that he was principal, radio is where we got most of our news and entertainment. And they're listening to some announcement on the radio there at Booker T. Washington. Again, that's Mr. Blake on the left. This picture was taken very recently. This is the Booker T. Washington that is open today. Now, this building opened in 1955, shortly after Mr. Blake died. So this was one of the new additions to Booker T. Washington School. Booker T. Washington opened in 1925 as a senior and junior high school, which means this year is its 100th anniversary. And again, 100 years. It opened as a high school and a junior high school for black students. in 1925, and it's been open for 100 years. The lady in the middle is Mrs. Blake, Mrs. Margaret Blake, Mr. Blake's wife. At that time, his widow. This was at his funeral, Mr. Blake's funeral in Tampa. Now, this house is where Mr. Blake lived. This is on 21st Avenue in an area that came to be known as Principals Row, because several black principals lived on this street. They were Mr. Blake's neighbors. Mr. Ben Griffin, who had been principal of Booker T. Washington when it was a junior high school. Mr. Griffin was my principal in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Mr. Howard W. Blake, again, who lived in this home with Ms. Margaret Blake, his wife. Mr. G.V. Stewart, who was principal at Middleton High School for 12 years before he went to work in the district administrative offices, lived next door to Mr. Blake. You know, it's kind of funny when you think about it, the Blake-Middleton rivalry that still goes on today, and just think, they actually live next door to each other on 21st Avenue. You had Mr. Lockhart, John W. Lockhart. Lockhart Elementary School in East Tampa is named for the man who for several years was principal at College Hill Elementary School. Mr. Richard Pride, who for several years was principal here at Howard W. Blake High School, lived right around the corner from these men. So that was called Principals Row, and there were others who lived on 21st Avenue where Mr. Blake lived in East Tampa. That's Mrs. Blake at the piano and some of her sorority sisters. Mrs. Blake was a woman of many talents. She had many advanced degrees. She loved this school. She was still alive when this campus opened in 1997, and I remember she had meetings with the alumni and discussing with them what the new Howard W. Blake High School would be all about. There's a historic marker giving you information about Booker T. Washington. And again, it opened as a junior-senior high school in 1925. Over the years, it was many things. When Middleton High School opened in 1934, that's when Booker T. Washington opened as a junior high school. And many of the people who had been teachers and students at Booker T. Washington transferred over to Middleton High School when Middleton opened in 1934. This is the first year that Howard W. Blake opened, 1956, and you see the students there in front of the entrance to the administration building. This building is still standing right around the corner. Again, now it's named for Stewart Middle School. These are two of the secretaries working at the original Howard W. Blake High School, Ms. Kennedy and Ms. Gardner. And this was the first year the school opened, 1956. These are some students. And I believe this might be tailoring, but they're learning skills that many of them practice all of their lives. And Blake High School opened as a vocational school. And let me tell you, before there was a Blake High School in West Tampa, there was a Don Thompson High School, not in West Tampa, but in Tampa Heights, on the other side of the river. Don Thompson had been the vocational administrator for the Hillsborough County School District. He was also a licensed electrician. And after World War II, when the black soldiers were coming back to Tampa, many of them had not graduated from high school. So a school was needed in addition to Middleton High School. At that time, there were so many black students, Middleton couldn't take all of the students. So the school district built Don Thompson High School. If some of you know where the Tampa Bus Transit office is, just north of Harrison Street, that's where Don Thompson High School was built. My father was a graduate of Don Thompson High School. And 3 years after the school opened, if you can believe it, Don Thompson High School won the state basketball championship for the whole state of Florida. Now, at that time, during segregation, when you had black schools and white schools, if you won a state championship, you really won a state championship, because all of the black high schools with large student population and small student population, they competed against each other. So to win a state championship really meant something. There is a picture of that state championship basketball team at Don Thompson, the forerunner of Blake High School, in your gymnasium, in the lobby of your gym. Next time you go in the gym, look for that basketball picture, Don Thompson State Championship basketball team. And later on, the students at Don Thompson attended Blake High School. This is a picture that was taken at the F.W. Woolworth department store on Franklin Street in downtown Tampa, probably taken in February 1960, when students from Blake High School, from Middleton High School, and from Booker T. Washington Junior High did what was called a sit-in. They sat in at the lunch counter at F.W. Woolworth department store, and later on at the other department stores in downtown Tampa, and then all over Tampa that had lunch counters. Why were they sitting in? These black students were protesting the practice of black people having to stand up at the counter when they bought their food, and they could not stay there and eat. They could not sit down like the white patrons could sit down and eat a hot dog or drink a Coke or whatever. You bought your food, you got it in a brown paper bag or in a cup, you got your drinks, and you had to leave. That wasn't right. That was racism. That was discrimination. That was difference in treatment. And so finally, the young black people in Tampa had had enough. And so they said, we're going to go and sit in until they serve us. It took months for them to be successful, for the sit-ins to end and black people being able to be served like whites. But Blake High School played a tremendous role in challenging racism and segregation. There's a historic marker today on Franklin Street that talks about the sit-in, Franklin near Polk Street. Next time you're downtown on Franklin Street, look for that historic marker. It actually has pictures on it and tells you the story. Now in 1971, the school district office said, segregation will come to an end in our schools. No more black schools, no more white schools, and guess what? Even the Latin students, they were called Latin then, pretty much attended Jefferson or Hillsborough High School. There was a lot of discrimination in Hillsborough County in the school district at that time. But guess who was not happy about it? Not just the black students, white students who you see here marching. They did not want the black students coming from Blake and Middleton coming to their schools, which were Hillsborough and Plant and Robinson and some other schools that had been pretty much all white since they were founded. So black students did not want integration either. The black students at Blake definitely did not want to leave Blake High School and transfer to other schools, but they didn't have a choice. In 1971, Blake became a 7th grade center. So the school around the campus that had been a black high school for all those years since 1956, in 1971 became a 7th grade center. Middleton became an 8th and 9th grade center, and black students were bused all over Hillsborough County, pretty much, so that the previously all white schools would have black students in their student population. So the black students were not happy, and many of the white students were not happy. This is Mr. Richard F. Pride, your principal during the late 1960s at Howard W. Blake High School. He also lived in that area I talked about, known as Principal's Row. A great man. When he left Blake High School, he went to the University of South Florida, where he worked for many years. This picture is also on display at the Tampa Bay History Center on Water Street down in Channelside. And these are some students in a business class. And I don't think you can see it in this photo, but we have another photo that has a bulletin board that has the kinds of occupations these students were training for, to be a secretary or a clerk or a bookkeeper or what have you. Because in 1956, many black people were locked out of positions like president of the company, business manager, administrative positions that paid the most, that came with the most responsibility. They were locked out of those positions in much of America because of racism. Only because of the color of your skin. Didn't have anything to do with the grades you made or the neighborhood you lived in, how much money your parents had. If you were black, you were locked out of a lot of occupations. And so Blake High School, Middleton High School, Marshall High School in Plant City trained black students to get the jobs that were available to them. And clerical positions were some of the positions that were open to some black students. Blake High School trained students well for occupations that were allowed for black students. But racism closed the door in the faces of many graduates of our schools during segregation. This is 1956. It was a very different world then. We've come a long way. So this is a picture of G.B. Stewart Middle School. This was the building that housed Howard W. Blake High School students from 1956 until 1971. And that school is still standing. There's a lot of history there. It's right around the corner, and you get to see it, and you get to see people who attended that building when it was Howard W. Blake High School. We have two of them with us here today. Anybody recognize that building? I think that's Blake High School. That's your school. That picture was taken right out front. Okay? Before there was a Blake High School where it is today, there was a hospital for black people named for a nurse, Clara C. Fry. The Clara Fry Memorial Hospital sat right here where this campus is for many years, from the 1930s until the late 1960s. Just like everything else in Tampa, the hospital was segregated. Black people came here for treatment. Black doctors worked here. Black nurses, black cafeteria workers. It was a hospital for black people. Finally, in 1967, Clara Fry Hospital merged with Tampa General Hospital. Before that, black people could not go to Tampa General like they can today. Black doctors would not be hired at Tampa General during the days of segregation. It was really a different world, but this hospital, which served black people all over Hillsborough County and beyond, sat right here on the grounds of where we now have Blake High School. Now, just down the street at Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park, who's been to that park? Raise your hands. Right down the street. I don't see many hands. Well, if you had attended the original Blake High School, you would be very familiar with this property because that's where a football stadium was, Phillips Field. Blake High School, the original Blake High School, never had its own football stadium. We take it for granted today when we walk around and every high school has a football stadium in Hillsborough County, right? But the black high schools, Milton and Blake, did not have their own football stadium. We played all of our games and all of the band competitions were held at Phillips Field, right down the street at Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park. That stadium was torn down in the early 1970s, but there are many memories, and when you talk to the alumni, they'll tell you they all have a lot of great memories at Phillips Field. Okay, that's the old baseball stadium on campus of the original Howard W. Blake High School. That picture was taken just a few weeks ago. And again, that's the front of the administration building of the original Blake, Garland V. Stewart Middle School today. And this just went up last year. This is a historic marker right in front of your school. You can't really see it from the administration building, but it's right out in front on North Boulevard that gives you the history, some of the things I've talked about of Howard W. Blake High School. Now, if you come to the Tampa Bay History Center, you'll see that black and gold jacket on display. That jacket belonged to a man who played tennis here during the 1960s, again, during segregation. We had great athletes at the black schools, but they could only compete against other black schools. So it didn't matter how good you were, it didn't matter how many points you scored, or how good a football player you were, or how good a tennis player, a baseball player. The black schools could only compete against other black schools. That's just the way it was. So we were fortunate enough to get jackets from Blake High School and Middleton High School to have on display at the Tampa Bay History Center. This is your history. Thank you all, and God bless you.